I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. A few months ago, in October 2021, we had on the show Caitlynn Peetz, the education reporter for Bethesda Beat, the only full-time education reporter in Montgomery County for any media outlet. In that episode, she made the point that no matter how much Montgomery County Public Schools seemed to be flailing, they were still doing better than other school districts, leading to our headline, Montgomery County is all right. Now, a few months later, for this episode, Peetz arrives at a different judgment. She says that there are really no metrics for when schools stay in person or go virtual. There's a lack of clarity about who is making these and other decisions, and an overall unwillingness to see mistakes that is resulting in doubling down on errors. If you are new to the show, I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. It is my hope that this podcast will help those who feel left out reconnect in our local communities. When Shannon speaks. Music for this episode comes from the Airport 77s, a 70s power pop and new wave band from Silver Spring in Montgomery County, Maryland. Andy Sullivan on vocals and guitar, Chuck Dolan on bass, and John Kelly on the drums. We are playing songs from their 2021 album, Rotation, which got a lot of play and was named the #1 album by the Evan Davis Show on WFMU in New Jersey. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Let's start with some unexpectedly good environmental news. Frederick County Planning Commission has expanded the Sugarloaf Preservation Zone all the way to I-270 from Montgomery County to the Monocacy River. This is likely to make any move to expand I-270 in Frederick County more difficult. The Montgomery County Board of Education, which is developing a new environmental sustainability plan, has indicated that it will commit the school district to the county's greenhouse gas reduction goals, 80% by 2027 and 100% by 2035. The original draft of the sustainability plan did not make these commitments, but public pressure via a petition and testimonies in front of the Board of Education appear to have moved the needle. In Virginia, the new governor, Glenn Youngkin, is proposing anti-masking and regulated history curriculums in the state's public school in the name of freedom, which then will not be available to local jurisdictions in Northern Virginia that tend to be more purple than red. This might change, though. The Spotsylvania School District Superintendent has been fired by a new, more conservative school board. This raises an interesting thought and perhaps explains an important puzzle: the difference between Northern Virginia and Montgomery County. The data, it seems, shows that Northern Virginia is adding jobs faster than Montgomery County. But puzzlingly, the population of Montgomery County keeps growing. Could it be that corporations set up operations in Virginia because they see that state as having a better business environment, but their employees prefer to live in Montgomery County, where even Republican governors can't force local county authorities and school boards to do something easily? To those who say that Montgomery County's population growth is among the less affluent, consider the incredible increases in home values. Who is buying these overpriced houses if all newcomers are really less affluent? It does seem that people prefer to live in jurisdictions that are heavily regulated, but prefer to work in jurisdictions that are less regulated. We see this attitude in traffic safety, for example. We like to speed through other people's neighborhoods, but expect others to slow down in ours. Which brings us to a really rough week for pedestrians in Montgomery County. On January 14th, a cyclist was killed by a garbage truck driver in Gaithersburg. And then on January 17th, 3 pedestrians were killed. 2 of them at locations in White Oak and the Wears Mill corridor that had seen recent deaths already. 2 police officers who were verbally abusive to a 5-year-old kindergartner who ran away from school in Silver Spring have been largely cleared of misconduct by the county court. 2 charges of assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress remain. County Executive Mark Elrich has indicated that he is open to a financial settlement claim from the family, even though the courts have absolved the county of any responsibility. Montgomery County is considering vaccine passports, which small businesses appear to be opposing mainly out of fear that the county will add yet more regulation on an already over-regulated local economy. There is a lot of news from MCPS, which seems to be in a state of disarray. Speaking at a meeting of the NAACP Montgomery County Parents Council, Interim Superintendent Monifa McKnight said that no one had expected the Omicron variant to be this contagious and to affect the already vaccinated so widely. MCPS's best hope is that the Omicron variant crests. Infection numbers are reported to be going down in Montgomery County already. Whether this let up in the siege laid by the virus will bring things back to normal depends on how you think MCPS has done up until now. That's my interview with Caitlynn Peetz, the only full-time reporter covering Montgomery County schools. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta.
Super great. What do you think he's like on a date? If he ordered the Chardonnay, would you order the Chardonnay?
Caitlynn Peetz, welcome back to I Hate Politics.
Hi, thanks for having me.
What are the top things you are following right now?
That's actually tougher than you might think because there's so much. There's so much right now. I feel like from the second that I got back into work, there was just 1,000 different things. But I think, top of mind for everybody right now has to do with how and when and what decisions are being made as far as when schools need to shift to virtual classes. And that has been a saga over the last couple of weeks, as we all know, and kind of following that has been very consuming, but I think that's a big thing. we're getting really close to filing deadline for the election. And I know that's not entirely top of mind for everybody, but it's super important as we're seeing play out. So I'm still following that pretty closely. And there's probably, 1,000 other things, but those are the first, those are the first two right now.
I'm surprised you didn't mention anything about staff shortages.
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure. I guess that goes hand in hand with the decisions about when schools need to close, right? That's one of the criteria they say they're looking at. And the staffing shortage is all inclusive to everything. I think we're seeing that play out. So that's a really good point. I should have pulled that out because it's important.
Let's talk about virtual versus in-person school, when we shift out. What is going on? What is the state of the art?
It's interesting because it seems pretty subjective right now, because, there was that school board meeting last week and MCPS, Dr. McKnight and the staff laid out that new plan, as they're calling it, which doesn't really have any metrics tied to it, but they're looking at really what they're calling very specific things as far as how the number of cases are affecting school operations. And so there's, the staffing shortage side, and particularly what staff members are out and how that affects operations. If it's a lot of bus drivers and you can't operate your buses, or you can't, get your meals put together, things like that will really affect decision making. One thing that I thought was really interesting in their list of things that they are using as decision guides was the community's perception of safety in the schools. So if a particular school community doesn't feel like their school can kind of meet that moment, that factors into their decision making, which I thought was an interesting add to that list.
Well, what does that mean even? How do they determine what community perception of safety means? I mean, isn't the community divided and that's the point?
Yeah, well, and I think that they want to get a finger on the pulse of every school community, but that's so hard to do, as we've talked about before. But they're not, MCPS says they're not making these decisions in a vacuum. They're not doing it just as admin or central office. They have or are putting together groups for each school community of like community leaders and PTA folks and stuff that are supposed to help kind of guide and give the input on this. But you're right. I don't think that there would be a clear 100% answer in any of the cases as far as that goes.
Have you met any of these groups that there are 209 schools. So that's a lot of people.
It is. And, when they were talking about this at school board last week, they took a break between the presentation and when school board members were supposed to ask questions. And I was kind of just chatting with some folks in between because the operationalizing of these groups will be interesting to see play out, just because are they meeting every single day and having these conversations, or what is that looking like? And that wasn't really something that was answered. And so I don't know. I haven't seen any of these outlines of who's in these groups and who's not, or when they're meeting, what they're talking about, or anything like that. So,
but these groups exist. I mean, they are called PTAs.
Listen, I don't know exactly how MCPS is folding those into the groups, and I don't know why they're choosing the approach that they're doing. I don't think that the rationale for it was ever really laid out.
Who do you think is making decisions here?
It's hard. I don't want to really speculate, but from the position where I'm sitting and kind of watching as things play out, it's just really hard to tell, which I think is also telling. In certain conversations that I've had with some even people I would consider higher up in the district, they've told me they don't know what to expect or what's coming. So I don't really know who's all looped in these conversations. Even as the school board approved this plan, or whatever they're calling it, for the decision making, they pressed pretty hard to add metrics to it for each of these different points and to make them public and where people can see them. But I think it was Dr. McKnight and her staff said, it's going to take some time to build out what the metrics and thresholds will look like, and we need to approve the plan as it is now. So I would expect in the next board meeting or two, they come back with some of those metrics, but this will be in place as it stands for a while.
Well, that raises the question, is that we are in this for 2 years now. So we are still asking for more time at the end of 2 years?
I guess so. It's also, another thing that MCPS is missing, and I don't entirely know where this stands at this point, was the school board and MCPS had said they were going to hire a health liaison to kind of help make these be the decision maker and the guide and things like this. And that, to my knowledge, I'm assuming that appointment would be made at school board, and I haven't heard anything as far as where that stands either.
Okay. What do you know about the relationship between MCPS, the Department of Health and Human Services? Is the Board of Education at all involved in these relationships? What does that look like to you as you report it?
I just was having a conversation with someone recently about it's been a really long time since anyone from the health department has come to a board meeting and briefed the board members, right? It's been, I could think when Dr. Gales was still here, and it was long before he left. So, we're looking at probably a year before they've been briefed publicly, and I'm not privy to what happens behind closed doors. So I don't entirely know. And to my knowledge, the board members that I talk to sometimes feel out of the loop. So I would venture to guess they're not entirely looped into these conversations either, which is interesting.
You just said board members are out of the loop. Is that right?
To some extent, I think in certain situations, they have told me they feel out of the loop and that they feel like they're the last to get information, or they're hearing things from me, or they're hearing things at the same time the rest of us are. So
how's that even possible? Isn't there a process for this?
You would think. I guess the way that the school board operates has always been interesting to me, because this isn't something that's new with COVID. I've heard similar sentiments for things since I started working here, which was years ago now. I'm an old veteran. So I guess at this point, this is the process, and this is how things function. Whether it's right or wrong, it's how it is.
Well, I wasn't even looking for your judgment on right or wrong. I was just wondering what you thought about the process. What is that relationship? Can you describe it?
My understanding from what I see in kind of what I hear from folks just is that it seems like individual board members have relationships with administration, and that they will, meet and have briefings and do things like that on their individual status. But it seems like when it comes to big issues like these, they just seem so often like nobody's really on the same page. So I don't know where the disconnect is, but again, there are so many situations in which I will call for a comment or ask, I heard something's coming, and the board members won't know. And so when people look at my reporting and they're like, why are we always talking to the MCPS spokesman or the MCPS officials? It's because, if I turn to certain board members in a lot of situations, there's nothing they can say because they're not aware. So it really kind of pigeonholes from the reporting side sometimes.
Well, have you thought about reporting the fact that you called A, B, and C and then they did not know?
We do sometimes. But usually in that situation, sometimes, you can make something up on the fly, or they can, not you, but or they'll redirect and say, get a comment from MCPS, and we'll report it that way when it comes out. So,
okay. Let's move on to staff shortages. And, what is the extent of it? What are you hearing? What are the remedies?
Yeah. So I don't have it right in front of me, but I know, again, I'm referring back to the last board meeting, but there were some numbers shown, and it was several hundred teaching spots that are open, which they called pretty severe, especially for this time of year. They said sometimes at the beginning of the year, you'll have a certain number of openings, but not this deep into the school year. So there's a lot of teaching shortages. Obviously, we're seeing the problems with the bus drivers really play out, and we saw that from the beginning of the year, and now it's escalated into not even being able to run routes. I think it's across the board. You're really seeing shortages everywhere, which is more detrimental to day-to-day operations than I think most people realize. I'm hearing stories from people that their kids are, their classes are being combined in this age of COVID, and hanging out in gyms and cafeterias, and having no supervision at times. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. It's a big deal that kids can't get to school because they don't have their bus that they rely on. All of these things are huge. And as far as remedies, I don't know exactly what, if anything, MCPS is doing differently. Like, I just read a headline about a neighboring school district that bumped subpay 25% or something like that. And I haven't seen anything similar coming out of MCPS to kind of really get the ball rolling. When I ask about the bus drivers, I am, told about job fairs every couple of weeks, and, directed to a link to job postings. And it's just, I haven't seen a lot of anything new, and maybe I'm just not seeing it or hearing about it, but to my knowledge, I'm not seeing it.
The county council claims that they have appropriated $250 million to MCPS. Are you tracking that money?
Well, because I stepped away, as you know, there's something that is on my list of things to get to. But after, the way the last 3 weeks have been, there hasn't been time, but it is top of mind to kind of try and get some answers as far as where that's going. If it's being used at all at this point, those are really important questions.
Right, because I would imagine if that money was available, the first thing to put it to would be the staff shortages.
Yep.
Okay. So maybe this is an opportunity as well to ask about the relationship between the county council and the school system. What is that relationship now? What do you think are the, where it's working, where it's not?
I think from my vantage point, what I see working pretty well is just this mutual understanding about that the school system relies pretty heavily on the county council for funding. And so the things that they need, the council generally in, every budget cycle, every time there's an appropriation they ask for, that is generally funded. And I've heard over and over, whatever you need, we're here, talk to us. I just think it seems like there's sometimes a little bit of a disconnect as far as communication goes. And we've had this conversation before about communication. And maybe I'm off base, but it just sometimes seems like the two sides maybe aren't communicating directly with each other, or maybe kind of talking at each other and not having the conversations to get to certain resolutions.
They don't talk to each other? I mean, like, they don't pick up the phone and talk to each other? Is that what you think? Is that what you feel?
I'm sure that they do. I mean, you have to have something that is functioning at all. but I don't know how to explain this a better way. It just sometimes seems like there's a disconnect between what is happening on the school side and what is perceived maybe by the county council side. And it's the same as
okay, explain what the difference in that perception is. So give you an example and explain that difference in perception.
So I think like what I was thinking when I was saying that was, when we talk about the last, 2 weeks and everything that's kind of gone wrong, coming back from winter break, this staffing shortages, big case rates, the bus routes, things like that, the miscommunications in this, coming from the administration, all of that put together, I think the county council sees this crisis mode in the school district, as most of the rest of the community is seeing and sharing. And then I think on the school side, there's almost like this unwillingness to admit that and kind of lean into the resources that they have for help. I think that there's I don't know if it's pride, I don't know what's happening there, right? But it's just so much of like, this isn't as bad as it seems, at the school board meeting again, they were talking about the bus routes and they kept saying, it's not so bad anymore. No routes have been affected more than 2 days. We only have 30 something odd routes not messed up anymore. And the reality of it is that a lot of that wasn't true. And so it's just hard. It's just hard to understand like where that disconnect and why that is. But I think that example, just my point is like, I think that the council's like there and ready, and the executive is there and ready and like offering, come to us and tell us what you need. But maybe that's not happening in the way that they need or want it to.
You said something that it is not true, and regarding the bus routes and what the bus route situation is, right? Are you saying that they are just basically not telling the truth to the council?
To be fair, like that was not told to the council. That was just an example from watching that school board meeting last week. But I don't necessarily think that they are purposefully not telling the truth. I really think that they think that they've operationalized things and gotten them back, to the level that they think they're at. But on the ground, in reality, it's not functioning as perfectly as they think it is.
Are they out of touch then? Is that the issue? I mean, they just don't know that the on the ground situation is bad, but they think that it's okay. I mean, they're just not getting the right reports. What seems to be the problem?
I don't know if I can really speculate on that front.
Okay.
I wish that I had an answer. I just don't know. It's just like, I talk to people all the time and it's like, I know that this isn't true. I know so many people who didn't have a bus ride for a week. So it's just, and maybe that's just my lucky vantage point of getting to talk to real humans every day and like people coming directly to me when there's a problem. Maybe that's what I'm seeing, and maybe it's better than like what I think it looks like. But I can say that it's not entirely true for them to say that everything is, rose-colored glasses at least on that front.
Okay. In your last interview, right, when the last time you were here on the show, you had said that MCPS, given all the things that had happened, was better off than other schools systems that were doing more poorly, right? And I use that to call that episode, Montgomery County is all right. Do you want to revisit that?
I think it is hard from my vantage point right now to see a lot of like really great things because there's so many problems and so many fires to put out and so many just really disappointing things for a lot of people happening. And that's all I've been seeing and dealing with for a while. So I'm in a tough position to answer your question. I feel like I'm a little bit biased right now.
Well, I'll take that to mean that Montgomery County is not all right now.
I think they're still all right. I think that we can get to a place where we get past some of the things that are happening. But I think we're definitely, I think the school system really has a lot of work to do.
Let's talk a little bit about you and your coverage of, a fast moving situation, sometimes clearly very hard to report, opaque sometimes. And, doing all the work that you do as the only education reporter in Montgomery County, you said you got burnt out on social media. Can you speak to the impact of this work on yourself?
Yeah, I think I would just preface by saying, I had a lot of things going on in my personal life as well that I wasn't really dealing with very well. But I think it would be untrue to say that the pressure and the work that I do didn't have an impact on that. We've been in this pandemic for 2 years, and every day there's something big and important that people need to know and they're turning to me for. But even before that, there was the boundary analysis, and it was it's been 3 really long, heavy, hard years with a lot that's come with it. And I just kind of it got to a point where I was not functioning. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was really isolating from everybody, and I would work the bare minimum, and I wouldn't want to do anymore. And then, it got to a point where I just went to my bosses and I said, I need some help. And they offered without me really having to ask for anything. They're like, okay, let's address this. And we addressed it. I took big rest, got a lot of help that I'm still getting. And I'm at a place where we've seen the last 3 weeks have been a lot. And I think 3 months ago, that probably would have been really crushing for me, but I'm handling that a lot better. And I think that I came back in a better place to do better for this community. And hopefully that'll come across.
Okay. I'm glad that things are better for you. I'm glad that you got the help. And I'm glad that you're back on 24 hours.
Listen, I set a lot of boundaries actually now that I'm back. I didn't come in to work until noon today because I have things to do at night. My coworkers have been amazing, stepping in and helping to cover some of this stuff. So it's not 24 hours anymore. But it's pretty close.
The pressure that you feel is the pressure that is across society. Parents feel the same pressure. Teachers obviously are at a breaking point. Students are about to walk out.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I think everybody is at their breaking point, or as close as they have been in a long time. I think everybody's tired. I think it's exhausting for teachers and parents and administrators to be, doing this since March of 2020, and we're in January of 2022 and still struggling to kind of get this under control and having to make hard decisions and having to deal with lack of communication, all of that put together on top of just having to deal with, the pandemic and its effects on your personal life, right? I think that's a lot. And I think that's understandably a lot.
One of the things that parents and teachers, I think, are most concerned about is this idea of learning loss. Have you covered this a little bit?
As we've seen in school districts across the country, there was an impact from virtual learning and I don't think it's fair to attribute all of that learning loss to being in the virtual setting. I think a lot of it, but I also think that there was a lot of other things going on. We have so many families in this community that lost people or had circumstances that were really hard that took the focus off of education. So there's a lot of different pieces to that, but at its root, we saw that learning loss and the impact from that. There was an update last week that I was not in on. I was dealing with something else, but we saw the data toward the beginning of the school year, where you saw, especially with the youngest learners, we're looking at like second grade, I think was the data that they showed specifically, leaps and bounds behind their peers from where their peers were at the same time pre-pandemic. And we saw over the summer, MCPS put a lot of emphasis and work into summer school to kind of try and mitigate some of that. I don't know if I've seen data about how effective that was. I'd have to look. But I think it will be really telling as we move through this school year and get more of that data, if that is compounded. And I think if it has, that will be really devastating for a long time for a lot of these students, especially the ones who were most likely to be struggling anyway.
Right. The question I have is it fair to compare this generation of kids to a generation of kids that didn't experience COVID, right? And how fair is that comparison, and should the goalposts not have moved forward or back or whichever way they had to because of COVID? Are we holding pre-pandemic standards up during a pandemic and expecting, those are the standards that we should meet? That seems unreasonable.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. And it kind of, again, gets back to my point that, this generation of kids went through so much more than I could ever imagine in my time as a student. So I would never want to compare the things, where I was and the things that I did to them. I don't know if there's a perfect answer, because you don't want to lose sight of how much they've been impacted and affected by all of this. But I do also think there needs to be some grace and understanding and trying and really creative problem solving to get them to where, if we're going to say and compare to pre-pandemic generations, we have to give them the resources and the support to have a shot at doing that, because not doing anything different isn't going to cut it. And that would be where it isn't fair.
Is MCPS doing anything different?
I know that there has been discussions about certain things that are happening as far as after school and before school and extra supports and things. But you'll have to forgive me. I'm a little bit fuzzy on what that looks like.
Yeah. So, I think the problem may be that the more urgent questions about virtual learning versus in-person learning or testing and PPE and all of that, are going to take precedence over, deeper things like learning. And there really is not the time or the energy or the bandwidth on the part of administrators to address learning loss when they can't even address whether or not school should be virtual or not, or whether there's staff shortages or not. So it's kind of almost moot based on how you're answering it. That's what I'm taking from it.
There's a problem at every level. And I think when there are consistent catastrophes that we're responding to in different fires to put out every single day, it's hard. And I see this from the reporting side, it's hard to, like you said, really put a lot of focused energy into addressing some of those bigger picture issues. I really wouldn't want to say that it's not happening, and that there aren't really concerted efforts to do that. Because I know at the school level that everyone's doing their best, and I think that there's probably a lot of that happening. But from my perspective, like where I'm at, I haven't had a lot of time to sit down and really think about that. So it's probably a me thing.
If Caitlynn Peetz doesn't report it, it doesn't happen in MCPS.
Oh, don't put that kind of. We just talked about pressure. That's too much.
We didn't talk about testing yet, or the PPE distribution that happened. So specifically on testing, and even before sort of the test kits were sent out, about in school testing, I beg your pardon. I heard that the process was fairly chaotic in the sense that, it wasn't clear how many tests MCPS were doing. Do you know how many tests they were doing regularly? And then I heard, because there are, state vendors involved, that it is hard to find a reported positive test when it is made. I personally got, calls from contact tracers, and they were not able to tell me when a child was exposed. And that's important information because that determines our testing window for that child. Have you heard anything?
I hadn't actually heard anything along those lines. I will say that I also am unaware of number of tests administered in schools, so that positivity rate, it's just no idea how to know that. I can tell you that much, but I don't. To your second part, I'm unfamiliar. It's very interesting though.
Caitlynn Peetz, thank you for coming on I Hate Politics. I hope you'll come back soon.
Shirt off a lot if you order the creme brulee. Would you order the creme brulee? You never had nothing good to say about creme brulee.
What lessons can we learn from my conversation with Caitlynn Peetz, Montgomery County's only full-time education reporter? First, the situation with MCPS is fast changing. After my interview with Peetz, MCPS ordered 16 schools into virtual learning. We still don't know what really pushed them over, while other schools with higher infection rates remain in person. The majority of the schools that went virtual have high numbers of low-income families. MCPS also increased its substitute pay. Short-term pay at the top of the scale went from $138 per day to $150. That's an 8% increase when other counties have offered as much as 25% increases. Finding substitutes is likely to remain a problem. Following a series of debacles, 94% of the members of the teachers union voted no confidence in the current MCPS leadership, and the principals and administrators union sent a strongly worded letter that asked for a pause to plan. However, former Board of Education members Jeanette Dixon and Mike Durso wrote an open letter urging the current Board of Education to appoint interim superintendent Monifa McKnight permanently and forthwith. Superintendent McKnight appeared at the NAACP Montgomery County Parents Council January meeting to make her case. Second, despite all these developments, it is hard to see how MCPS gets out of this without a veritable end to the pandemic itself. It seems like MCPS planning is geared for the best and then unable to deal with the worst. There are still no metrics and hence no standard expectations for when schools will go virtual or remain in person. Perhaps the most important consideration in this is the opinion of the school community itself. But how is this opinion sought and delivered? Are principals in any position to correctly gauge and convey one opinion from the school community when public opinion is in fact so divided? Who is part of these consulting groups at schools? MCPS often talks about the importance of community input, but it is hard to see it at work. Incredibly, MCPS has resisted the local community school councils proposed by the Kerwin Commission. In fact, MCPS schools tend to be fortresses rather than community hubs. But perhaps the most damning of all criticism is Caitlynn Peetz's observation that MCPS doesn't see its mistakes and leans into old ways of doing things. That's a larger problem than the pandemic itself. That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta.
She does this thing with her hips when she swerves and she dips when the music's not even playing. She does this thing with her eyes, keeps me mesmerized all day. She does this thing to my heart, makes it stop and start. I think it might stop pumping sideways. She does this thing to my head, you know she's just gotta have it her way.
Music for this episode comes from the Airport 77s, a 70s power pop and new wave band from Silver Spring. Andy Sullivan on vocals and guitar, Chuck Dolan on bass, and John Kelly on drums. We are playing songs from their 2021 album, Rotation. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone who might want to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and your home. See you next time.